Code enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. I'm Scott Kirshner with Dedicated Threat Solutions. First up, we have Jill Robinson, who was 52 years old when she was killed in August of 2018. She was lured to the house by the homeowner, where she was shot and killed in the perpetrator's driveway. Gas was poured over her body and she was lit on fire. Her vehicle was also set on fire, and the neighbor's house was also set on fire, killing a cat and 5 dogs. A few observations regarding this incident. The fact that she was lured to the house shows a level of premeditation on the part of the offender. The fact that he pours gas over her body, sets her vehicle on fire, and lights the neighbor's house on fire shows a level of anger and rage and resentment. The perpetrator was Kevin Billings, who was 65 years old at the time of the homicide. He was sentenced to life without parole. Michael Tribus was 65 years old when he was killed in 2018, also by gunfire. He was shot in a municipal court building. This incident occurred just after 8 a.m., and the perpetrator who shot him knew that he had absolutely nothing to do with the problem he was having, but he shot him anyway. A couple of observations regarding this is we tend to think of our place of employment, where we work out of, as a relatively safe place. So we think violence is not going to generally happen where we work, but usually out in a field environment. And this incident shows that that's not the case. It also occurred just after 8 a.m., which tells you that this offender also had a level of rage, that he was there first thing in the morning to carry out his deadly intentions. And even though Tribus wasn't the person who was targeted in this particular homicide, the offender still was willing to shoot anybody to get out his anger and his rage. The perpetrator was David Green, who was 73 years old at the time of the homicide. He has not yet been sentenced for his crime. He has pled guilty but mentally ill. He was also competent to stand trial and found that he was not insane, but he does have some mental health issues, to include a delusional disorder. Rodney Morales was 40 years old when he was shot to death in 2008. He was shot after entering an apartment building to investigate what we're going to call a routine zoning complaint. And the reason I use the word routine is because in doing the research on his particular case, a lot of the news media outlets use the phrase routine zoning complaint. And I really want to stress that just like in law enforcement with vehicle stops, there's no such thing as routine in what you do. The job tasks you do may be routine in nature, but because you're dealing with individuals and people are not routine and they can exhibit unpredictable behavior. So one of the things I want you to walk away from today is the mindset, a little phrase that I say every day, every inspection. And this is a way for you to fight complacency. Every day, with every inspection that you do, you're going to follow proper safety and security procedures to make sure that you are as safe as possible in the performance of your duties. The shooter confronted the officer as soon as he walked into the apartment building and shot him in the chest. And even though he was shot with a .25 caliber firearm, which is a relatively small weapon, it was still proved to be very, very deadly. Additionally, Rodney was a former police officer with NYPD. The perpetrator was 22 years old at the time of the homicide, and it was Harry Williams. He's now serving life without parole in the Colorado Department of Corrections. Nicky Wright was 46 years old when he was killed in 2001. He was shot to death following a contact at a car lot to issue a citation. He was dismembered with pieces of his body burned in a 55-gallon drum, and his remaining body parts were placed in various junkyard cars and crushed. This shows a level of depravity that goes beyond most people's imagination.
It's a high-profile case that left a public servant dead because of the color of his skin. I'm Molly Halpern of the FBI, and this is Gotcha. Nicky Wright, a Memphis code enforcement officer, went missing in April 2001. His body was never found. The civil rights team in the FBI's Memphis field office partnered on the case with the local U.S. Attorney's Office. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jonathan Scarametti.
There was no forensic evidence, so it was a really difficult case to make.
The investigation showed Officer Wright was shot to death death after issuing a warning citation at property belonging to Dale Martis. Martis pled guilty in federal court last year to the racially motivated killing of Wright. Case agent Tracy Harris says Martis admitted to burning Wright's body. Harris specializes in civil rights cases and is a voice for victims who can't speak for themselves.
As an investigator, you become that voice for them, become their advocates, and you have to champion their cause.
Martis was sentenced to life in prison with no parole.
Martis also admitted to killing Dr. Henry Ackerman in June of 1998. Dr. Ackerman went to purchase a car from Martis at his business. The men got into an argument, and Martis beat Ackerman to death with a hammer. Clearly, this is an individual who has a lot of anger and rage and a lot of violent tendencies. Greg Ziss was 64 years old when he was killed in 2017, and he was shot to death with a shotgun. He was fatally shot in the head with a sawed-off shotgun while sitting in his vehicle. It was an attempted carjacking that went bad. Multiple suspects, ranging in age from 16 to 21, were arrested for the crime, and a 17-year-old juvenile was the one who allegedly pulled the trigger. Each of the perpetrators received sentences ranging from 22 years to 35 years in both prison and community supervision. Michael Walker was 44 years old when he was killed in 2005. He was killed as he was following up on a complaint about trash in the front yard of an individual's home. As Walker took pictures of the property, he was confronted by the property owner and his son. The son went into the home, received a .45 caliber handgun, and shot Walker 9 times. The perpetrator was Adam Ward, who was 22 years old at the time. He was executed by lethal injection in 2016. Ward did show signs of mental health problems from a very early age, and at the age of 4, he was prescribed lithium for bipolar disorder. He was found competent to stand trial and was eventually executed for the crime. So let's go over some of the realities of these incidents. All of the victims were shot to death. Walking away was not an option, and this is a point that is really important to discuss because a lot of times what I will hear is people who are in decision-making roles and management positions will always tell their staff at the first sign of problems, just walk away. That cannot be the answer to all of the problems. If we look back and review the cases that we just went over, none of them had the ability to just walk away. So there has to be a training component involved. Lethal violence can occur suddenly and with little warning, and we saw that in a lot of the cases today. Mental health was a factor with some of the perpetrators, and it is important to bring out that those who have mental health problems are not any more likely to be violent than anybody else in society, but those who are violent tend to be more violent than the average individual. Some of the offenders had prior criminal histories, and the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So it's good to know the residents and the businesses that you're going to do your inspections. The more background information that you can gather on them, that's just more information that can help you make better decisions on how you're going to proceed with your interactions. 3 of the perpetrators were older at ages 57, 65, and 73, and we cannot have the mindset that just because somebody might be older and also younger as well, whether they're a juvenile, that they cannot be a danger to your health and safety. So some key points: anybody can be a threat to your safety regardless of age. Juveniles and the elderly can also be a lethal threat to you. Walking away is not always an option. Then what is your backup plan if you cannot walk away? And that's the part that really needs to be addressed within the profession of code enforcement. Violence can occur extremely fast. And again, if we look back at some of the cases that we discussed today, we see that they progress in a very short time span and violence happened very fast. There is not always a build-up to the actual act of violence. Training matters, and I can't stress that enough. There has to be a component of training that all code enforcement officers receive. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Again, if you can do a little bit of research ahead of time before you do your inspections, that can provide you with very valuable information. Your job duties may be routine, but people are not. Do not become complacent when performing inspections. Safety equipment are just tools to keep you safe. They do not determine how you act, and I'll discuss that more in a little bit. Training considerations. Do not become complacent with safety. Again, the mantra that I really want you to walk away with today is every day, every inspection. And if you use that, you'll have the mindset that you will not fall into the complacency trap. Situational awareness is absolutely a critical skill, but it is not enough. Officers must be provided practical and realistic training. Training should include training on mindset, mental toughness, mental rehearsal skills such as visualization and imagery. Defensive tactics training to include a 40-hour defensive tactics academy with an annual refresher every year that is between 8 and 16 hours. And that 8 to 16 hours is really the bare minimum to keep you refreshed. There still needs to be ongoing training throughout the year. Defensive tactics training should cover use of force and legal justification, verbal de-escalation skills, the implementation and use of OC spray, expandable baton, edged weapons defense, and gun disarming techniques. It should also include multiple scenarios that officers go through, some of which there will be no use of force involved and others that do have use of force. Firearms is also another option for training. Now, I know this is a hot topic with a lot of places, but we did see that of all of the officers that I discussed today, every single one of them were shot. And that's not to say that if they had a firearm that they would have still survived the incident. But we know that there are firearms out in the community and the houses that you go to and the businesses that you go to, and it's just a tool. One of the biggest concerns I hear is we're not police officers, or if you are issued a firearm, it's going to turn you into a police officer. I have been an officer survival instructor with 2 large agencies, and one of them went from, and this was a probation department, one of them went from only doing verbal de-escalation skills and OC spray training, going to a full 40-hour defensive tactics academy, and then a 40-hour firearms academy. Very few people who became armed were there issues with them. They all behaved professionally, and it did not change the mission of what they were there to accomplish. Of the few that maybe did have a few problems, they were very easy to correct. Again, a firearm is just another tool to help keep you safe. It does not determine how you interact with the inspections that you do, and it does not change the mission of your job. And I want to take a brief second to talk about body-worn cameras. Body-worn cameras should not be considered a safety tool as they only have the capacity to record what occurs. They offer no active safety measures against a violent physical assault. They must not be used in lieu of actual safety training and equipment. Body-worn cameras are not safety equipment. They are an after-the-fact tool, and if anything, they will help in a court of law after the fact, or if you are investigated for an alleged behavior. One of the maxims that I use in a lot of my trainings, and one that I stand by all the time, is hope is not a survival strategy, luck is not a survival tactic. We need to provide code enforcement officers with practical, realistic, and ongoing safety training. I've written a book, Officer Survival for Code Enforcement Officers. It's available on Amazon.com. This book covers self-assessment, combat mindset, survival fundamentals, use of force, officer safety practices, self-aid and buddy aid, and it does contain multiple exercises to increase your level of skills. So whether you're new to code enforcement or you've been on the job a long time, there's a lot of good information in this book that you can immediately implement to keep you safer. If you'd like to reach out to me, I'm at info@dedicatedthreatsolutions.com. I also have a website at www.dedicatedthreatsolutions.com, and you can link up with me on social media platforms as well, on Facebook, Instagram, Indeed, and I do have an Amazon author page. And thank you for all you do in the community.